Hi, everybody. Welcome. Give us a few more moments to make sure that all families have been able to log in, and we will get started momentarily. Thank you. Hi, folks. Thank you for joining us today. Please give us a few more moments to make sure that all families have been able to log into the session, and we'll get started momentarily. Hi, everybody. My name is Ronaldo Lunagakad, and I want to welcome you to the third webinar in our Summer 2022 Family Webinar Series. I'm the Assistant Director of Student Transitions and Family Programs, and tonight I am joined by my colleague from Student Financial Services, Andrea Stewart-Douglas, who's the Associate Director of Student and Family Engagement. We are so excited that you've chosen to join us for tonight's conversation. Some information before we get started. First, we want to make sure you know how to submit questions during this webinar. You'll notice that we've given you the ability to ask questions via the Q&A feature. Our professional staff within Student Transitions and Family Programs are helping to field these questions. To make sure you know how to use the question and answer feature, please share the place you're watching from, and we'll name a few of them on air live. Second, we will be showing a PowerPoint created by our panelists during tonight's webinar. However, if you prefer to download this PowerPoint and follow along on your own, please use the link that we're going to share in the chat just now. As a note, in the chat feature, we will be sharing links and email addresses for the duration of the webinar. Third, this webinar is being recorded live. Next week, it will be uploaded to the families.woostel.edu website. In a moment, we will hear from our panelists about Student Financial Services. If something she says sparks a question, don't forget to send it to us using the question and answer feature. After the presentation, we will move into the Q&A portion for the evening. Before passing things along to our panelists, I want to make sure that we share some of the places that folks are joining us from tonight. We have families tuning in from Omaha, Nebraska, Florence, Wisconsin, Iowa City, Iowa, among many other locations. Now, since I know you all want to hear more about Student Financial Services, I will turn it over to our panelists.
Thanks, Reggie. Again, my name is Andrea Stewart-Douglas, and I am the Associate Director of Student and Family Engagement in the Office of Student Financial Services. And I am very honored and excited to speak with you all about student financial services in general, and to talk to you about some important topics concerning billing and payment and financing options that we offer here at the university. So just to get things started, I wanted to share a little bit about our office in Student Financial Services. Every year we award about $135 million in institutional scholarships and grants. And so our office is the primary disperser and awarder of undergraduate financial aid here at WashU. We also are staffed with 6 full-time financial aid counselors, including myself, and we have a very experienced and talented staff. In fact, when you add up the cumulative years of our time in student financial services or financial aid in general, you're going to come to about over 80 years of experience combined. And so with that, we are a group of folks that, we love working with students, prospective as well as current. We love working with families to come up with solutions, really to make WashU an affordable option for our families at the time that students are entering WashU and during their 4 years here at the university. We follow what I call a highly personalized approach. And what we strive to do is to make sure that we are building connections and relationships with our students and families. And that, again, starts from the very outset, from the very time that students are applying to the university. When students are admitted to the university, we are assigning an SFS counselor to each student. And every student that's admitted gets an assigned counselor. That's a student who is receiving financial aid, and even students that aren't, because we recognize that things can change over a 4-year period of time financially for families. And we want students to understand that there's someone here that's dedicated to assisting them. And so that approach has been really fruitful for us. We also have a very service-oriented office in that not only do we provide financial aid resources, but we also, we have a staff of service center representatives. And so these are our what we call our frontline folks that are manning our 1-800 line, our main email address. And so they are also very talented and skilled folks that are able to answer plenty, large number of questions that come our way. And so there's always someone here in SFS who, again, is willing and pretty well able to answer most questions that families usually have. Just to mention a little bit about the financing and payment plan options, the university provides a really unique program called the Partners in Education with Parents. It's one of the best financing programs in the country. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of those options, but we find that this is a very popular option that families use when they are trying to, make sure that there's funding in place for their students. And sometimes this can be in addition to any financial assistance that students are receiving. In addition to that, we also provide an installment payment plan. And so for families that may not be interested in borrowing funds, but may want to stretch out their resources to pay their students' costs, many of them enroll into the installment payment plan. And I'll share a little bit more information about that. So those are two of the primary arms that we work with in addition to providing aid. These are also some other options that we work with families on. And then some of the other services that we provide in SFS, we also help students find employment. Most of the students that we work with are students that are on financial aid, and so therefore they qualify for the federal work study program. So we have a counselor who works exclusively on managing that program for the university. We also help students manage their funds. Oftentimes we find that students haven't had a whole lot of experience managing budgets and managing money. And so we find that it's really helpful for us in terms of, helping them connect the dots with respect to financial aid, when we can also show them and guide them in terms of how to manage monies that they receive as a student here at WashU. Oftentimes students are receiving refunds, and oftentimes they may not know exactly how to spend those refund dollars. And so we do consider that to be an important part of what we do at WashU. We also help students better understand their accounts. Again, many students, first years especially, may not be familiar with some of the terminology. They may not understand how things flow with money. And so we will spend time with them, walking them through what all those transactions mean that they're seeing in their student account, and really what the greater implications are. We help them understand when there is a credit in their account, and we also really help them understand when there's a balance that's due in their account, and help them maybe come up with some solutions for helping them pay that outstanding balance that may be due. And then just generally speaking, we provide some best practices with regard to bank accounts, loans, and credit. And I will put in a plug that sometime next month, we are planning to launch an online platform called iGrad. That's a very interactive platform that we are excited to roll out to students. That's going to have tons of information that's going to help them manage their money. So there will be a budgeting tool. There will be a lot of content regarding, just understanding financial aid, generally speaking. We're going to provide information about credit cards and debt and things of that nature. So I would just be on the lookout for that. We'll definitely be sending out an announcement in the coming weeks about that information. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is WebSTAC. WebSTAC is the portal, the student portal that your student has probably gotten used to navigating by now. But I wanted to mention for your benefit as a parent to understand what WebSTAC does. WebSTAC is the place that students can go and view their billing statements. And this is also a place where students would go to register another individual to have access to their bills so that that individual would be able to pay essentially the balances that are due. Students would need to go to WebSTAC and set up a feature called Add Other Payer. This would allow them to add you as a parent or guardian, again, to view and pay the bill as a guest. Another use for WebSTAC is for signing up for direct deposit, which we highly recommend students to do. It's so much easier for students to get any refunds or disbursements that the university may be processing if they get it electronically. And so we definitely, for our first year students, we're going to be sending lots of messages in the coming weeks about signing up for direct deposits. And it's something that we highly encourage. Okay, not sure what happened. Hi guys, I'm still here. I hope you all are too. Don't know what happened.
Hi, Andrea. We can still hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Give me one sec. I'll just keep talking. Give me 1 second here. Oh, there we are. I think it's definitely me. I timed out here on my end, so I do apologize for that, guys. Okay, so where did I leave off? I left off with direct deposit. So we definitely encourage students to sign up for that. We also want you to know about BearBucks. BearBucks would be accessed, or this would be the place where students would get that added onto their campus card through WebSTAC. And if you don't know about BearBucks, BearBucks is a very useful, these are points that students can add on essentially to their card to be able to, use it to purchase food, either, at a convenience store, a local eatery here. Students can use it to do laundry. There are also merchants that are off campus that students may also be able to use BearBucks at. And if you go to the Campus Card Services website, there's tons of information about on-campus and off-campus merchants that will accept BearBucks. And then lastly, WebSTAC is also the place where students can make updates to any personal information. So if there's changes in their home address, if there is information that needs to be corrected because perhaps it may be set up in error, this would be the place where students would go to correct that information. Okay, so this next slide shows you, if you are a parent or an individual that has been set up as an authorized person, the way that you would see your students' information, your billing information, would be through CashNet. So students would access this information, see their transactions, see their balances through WebSTAC, but once you've been given this access, you will go through a system called CashNet. So you get to see the billing statement, you get to see the transactional activity in your student's account. And again, this is the place where you would also go to pay your student's balance. So in terms of the billing process, you all have gotten that first bill already. So July 1st is when fall bills were released. The bills are all released on a semester's basis, so you can expect to receive the spring bill to be released by December 1st. And for this first payment, the fall bill, the payment is due on August 20th. And then likewise for spring, that payment would be due on January 20th. And for any balances that go unpaid after the close of the month for August, there will be a 2% late fee that would be charged for any unpaid balances after August. And what happens then is if there is an outstanding balance after August, the student will continue to see a monthly bill be released until that balance has been paid off. Students can take a look again at that real-time activity in their account through WebSTAC. One of the things that we're pointing out for students, and we're beginning to hear a lot from students now, is it's about the insurance premium, that student health insurance premium that showed up in the fall bill. This year, the amount's $2,232. And the one thing I want to make sure the families are aware of, if your student is covered by insurance, I would strongly encourage you all to go to, or have them rather, go through WebSTAC and access a link. This link would allow the student to submit a request for an insurance waiver, and they can do this until September 5th. This way, by answering a series of questions, the university can determine if the insurance coverage that your student currently has is sufficient. And if the university deems it to be sufficient, then the waiver would get approved and that charge would get reversed off of your student's account. The other thing, I think I've already mentioned this in terms of the billing statement. Again, you would be able to see a lot of this activity through having access as a guest to your student's account. In terms of payment options, I've already talked about the fact that the billing happens on a semester's basis. Sometimes we get questions about, if families are interested in knowing if they can use a credit card to perhaps pay a balance that's due, and the university does not accept credit card payments. So that's why you'll hear us talk a lot about either financial aid or family using their own cash resources, or student loans or parent loans. But in terms of a credit card, it's something that's not accepted here at the university. Now, to talk a little bit more about the installment payment plan, this is an interest-free monthly payment. And so if you sign up by the 25th of this month, that will get you enrolled so that deductions can be made or payments can be made beginning August 1st and the first of every month until the end of the year. And so getting in now gives you the benefit of spreading out your student's balance over 5 months. There is a small fee of $40 that you would pay for this program. And if you're interested in repeating this process for the spring semester, you would just simply re-enroll, pay the additional $40 fee, and then basically, again, be able to spread those payments over 5 months for the spring semester. Now, parents that may be interested in financing can work with the university through the private plan I mentioned earlier, the Partners in Education with Parents, PEP. We encourage you to, really get a hold of our PEP folks. If you've got questions, you can definitely access information about the program at our website, financialaid.wsto.edu. But there's a lot of detailed and straightforward information that I think that you'll find helpful on the website. We have options of being able to borrow over multiple years. There's a prepay option where you would put up some resources of your own. We have an annual fee, or an annual financing option where parents would take out a loan, each single loan each year. And then a combination plan where a family could do a combination of putting up some of their own resources through, say, a 529 education savings account, and then maybe finance any remaining portion that's not met through the 529, financing that through a PEP loan from the university. So again, there's a combination of ways that you can approach this. We have a worksheet. If you visit the site, there's a worksheet that if you answer a few questions, it will spit out basically a worksheet that will lay out side by side all of those options based upon the scenarios that you provide in terms of how much you want to put up on your own resources, how much financial aid your student is receiving. And so using those inputs will calculate for you, what you would be looking at for each and every single one of these options. And if there is a borrowing that's taking place, what your monthly payment would be. I will say all of our loans are you're looking at a 10-year repayment period for those. And then if you didn't want to work through the university, but would prefer to go through the federal government, you can always consider applying for a federal Parent Plus loan as well. I mentioned earlier that our office manages the Federal Work Study Fund, and I did want to mention that it's going to be real important for your student who is serious about working in their fall semester, that when they come to the university, it's a good idea for them to bring with them the information that's going to be needed, and I'll share more about what that is in the next slide. But basically the process is if the student wants to begin working in the fall semester, they would need to go to the Career Center website, and they are going to need to create a student account through a platform called Handshake. Handshake really will technically launch on August 1st, so that by the time your student really needs to kind of dig into this process, that will be the platform that they'll be using. But again, they're going to create an account, and then employers here on campus will be able to access this database and be able to contact students that they're interested in. But I would also say that if a student has identified a job, because there will be an opportunity for them to view open positions, I would say that it's not a bad idea for the student to reach out to the employer directly. That is allowed, and introduce themselves, let them know that they're interested in the position. And then, they can work with the employer to maybe set up a phone screen or maybe a Zoom call, and they would just follow that process. But ultimately, those departments are going to be the ones who make the decision on who they want to hire. But it's always a really good best practice for students to kind of get ahead by early August, kind of get a jump start on that process, and at least know that they're putting their best foot forward and will be an early candidate for jobs. And there are some jobs that go pretty quickly. There are some popular jobs that all students are interested in working. And so, just get a jump start on that and get going in early August is the best advice I have for you on that. And then a little bit more about the documentation that students will need. Students are basically going to be considered an employee of the university. And as with all new employees, we have a process, an onboarding process that the student would need to follow. And the first thing that they would need to do is to complete their I-9 documentation. And with the I-9 documentation, essentially it's a way for the university to authenticate that they are indeed a citizen or eligible to work in the United States, and they are who they claim that they are to be. And so we require students to bring that information with them. Now, if you want to, run the risk of mailing that information, not necessarily the best option, but we advise students to bring those documents with them to campus, because we're going to require originals. So we can't take copies of any of that information. That would be things like a copy of not the copy, but the birth certificate, social security card, things like that. And there are non-federal work study jobs available. So students who don't necessarily have financial aid or federal work study for that matter, they are able to still work. And so essentially students would go to the same portal, Handshake, and register there, and then be able to take a look at all of the employment opportunities that would be available. Both work study and non-work study opportunities are there. In terms of outside awards, this is also a pretty active time that we are beginning to receive either communications or direct payments from students who have won outside scholarships. And I will say that students who win outside scholarships, it does not automatically reduce any scholarship that we've already provided the student in their award. So students can bring their scholarship checks directly to our office. We are open between 8:30 and 5 p.m. every day, Central Time. We also have a drop box that sits right outside our office. And so if students want to come after hours, we have a secure box that they can drop those checks into. And they also can simply mail it to our office. And so we'll accept those checks and get those basically included in the Students Award as soon as possible. But again, the key is that we don't make immediate reductions to any scholarship or aid that we've already provided the student. As long as there's room to add those funds in and we don't go over the total cost of attendance for the 22-23 award year, then your student's in great shape to keeping those funds. Just to again repeat this, I'm sure you all have heard this in maybe a prior session with me or on another webinar or even visited our website. WashU continues to be committed to meeting 100% of demonstrated need for all students. We will continue to offer no loan awarding to students who have a household income of $75,000 or less. And those students will have their awards met with grants, scholarships, and federal work study, no loans. The other thing I'll mention for first years in particular who meet those income categories, as well as who may be Pell eligible, we are providing your student with first year grants. I've been spending the last few days working on communications that will be going out next week, reminding your students who are eligible for the technology grant and the startup grant that we're gonna start looking for you all to submit your orders for your computers. And so there's a lot of detailed information, and I'll ask your students to read the emails and read them closely because there's some actions and steps that they need to follow in order to secure their laptop and to make sure that the funds that we have provided reach them. So be on the lookout for those emails next week. The other thing I'll reemphasize, and again, you may have heard this in a prior session, is we are an institution that wants to continue to help meet families' need. And if there are changes in a family's financial circumstances, we are happy to reevaluate any student's award based on those changes. And again, those changes could mean things like a change due to a job loss. Perhaps there has been an expense, a medical expense to be exact, that the family now has to incur and they may be facing a challenge in trying to meet what those expenses are. Private school tuition is another thing. Sometimes families may have given us an estimate on a private school cost or maybe daycare costs initially when a student was applying for aid, and maybe those costs have increased. So that would be information to share with your SFS counselor, because again, we can use any changes like that really are going to have any bearing or impact on your ability to pay for your child's education. We definitely want to go back and revisit to see if there's additional aid that we can provide. Students and yourselves, if you have questions about the award or transactional activity in the student's account or the bill, if you want to know more about the payment and financing options that I've shared, we are here to answer your questions and to serve you. We are available by office visits. You can contact each counselor by phone. We have a counselor on duty every single day. We have someone on duty on Zoom every single day. And so there's multiple ways for you to reach us. Email, of course, works as well. And walk-ins, we always welcome students to walk in, families to walk in. You don't have to have an appointment to meet with an SFS counselor. All you need to do is to come to the east end of campus, Summers Welcome Center. You come downstairs and you will be greeted by our staff, and you sign in, and within a matter of minutes, you could be sitting down and speaking with one of our officers. These folks that are listed on this slide are our full-time SFS counselors, and each of them have been assigned to a student here at WashU who is receiving financial aid, and again, those who aren't. And so at this point, I suspect that your student should know who their SFS counselor is. We assign counselors based on the first letter of a student's last name. And so this is a breakdown that you can see here. This information can also be found on our website. Even though my name is not listed, I also meet with students. I also have appointments that I can meet with the prospective student, prospective family, even current students. So if you're interested in speaking with me, I'd be happy to sit down and again, meet with you over Zoom, in person, or by phone. This is our general contact information. But if you dial the toll-free number or even our general line and you ask to speak to any of the people that I've mentioned, including myself, they can definitely transfer you over and get you connected to us.
Thank you, Andrea, so much for sharing that information. To get us started, I have a question that I know many families may be wondering, and you referenced this a little bit during your presentation. How can students give their families access to view and pay their billing statements?
So the best way is to go to WebSTAC, and I'm not exactly sure the placement of it, but definitely the starting point is WebSTAC, and there are places there that will guide the student on giving access to the parent or to a guardian, but anyone that the student wants to designate as a person to view their bill and pay their bill, the student has the power really to do that through WebSTAC.
Thank you. We will now move on to the question and answer portion of the webinar. Families, as a reminder, please submit your questions via the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. Andrea, first question really quickly. When is tuition due for fall 2022?
August 20th.
Awesome. Does the university have scholarships that students can apply for after they are accepted?
Unfortunately, the university does not offer scholarships, merit scholarships to students. We award our merit scholarships, that's both the divisional scholarships and the signature scholars program. We award those in a student's first year. And so once those decisions have been made about who those scholars are and who those winners are, there really aren't any changes to that.
Does Student Financial Services award any merit-based scholarships to students who are doing well academically at WashU?
I wish we did, but it's a pretty, sort of fixed process in that regardless of how well students are doing academically, if they did not receive those scholarship dollars that I just mentioned in their entering year, first year, as much as I would love to give it to them later, that just is not the process that we follow here.
Andrea, we have some folks who are asking, how do I connect my 529 plan to pay tuition?
So I think the best way to approach that is to go and visit the student accounting website. Mm-hmm. There is information. These again are the folks that handle the billing, and these are the ones that handle student accounts. I would go to their website and check out and see what instructions they have on how to get those payments, those disbursements from 529s over to the university. You can also reach out to speak to a representative from that department as well. But I think it's going to vary by state perhaps, or even if it's a tuition, a prepaid program versus a 529. So I'm not really an expert on that. I would just encourage you to take a look at the website and see what they say there.
Okay. As a follow-up to the 529 question, we have somebody asking if they can use external scholarships or their 529 in order to pay for things like WashU's health insurance premiums.
So the external scholarships, they would be essentially those outside scholarships that I mentioned earlier. And so any student receiving an external or outside scholarship, we would first want them to notify our office. Because what we do is we take the information that we receive, the notification about that scholarship, and we add that into the student's award. And so the students' dollars from these scholarships will essentially flow over to their student account, and any dollars that are credited to the student account can be used or applied towards meeting any of those expenses that show up, one of which would be the student insurance.
Thank you. Does the university provide scholarships for things outside of tuition? I know you had mentioned the technology grants, but to things like housing, books, or food?
Well, our office does not. We handle what we call cost of attendance items, which of course books and supplies would be included in that, but the cost of attendance is essentially a budget that's set. And that's the same budget that every student essentially has as we're building out financial aid each year. So if there is a student who has additional cost above and beyond what we've budgeted for as far as book supplies, maybe travel, just some additional things like that, or maybe some incidental costs that kind of come up. I would encourage students to reach out to the Office of Student Success. They handle sort of a unique or extra expenses that go beyond the normal cost of attendance that we handle in our office. So the Office of Student Success is a really good resource. And from there, if it's something that they can't respond to, I do believe that they can help the student find another resource here on campus.
And to clarify one of the points, the student success is not in office at the university anymore, but their staff members have moved over to the Deneb STARS program. So for any of those pieces, make sure that you're contacting the Deneb STARS program. Andrea, what is the mailing address or process for local scholarships that students receive that the host agency wishes to send directly to WashU? So what address should we be providing if the scholarship wants to send you something directly?
So I think on that last slide, it may have had oh, okay, it did not. So if you go to our website, you can find the address there, but it's 1 Brookings Drive, St. Louis, Missouri, 63130. And you would also want to reference, I'm just looking here on my card, Campus Box 1041. So that's the campus box to Student Financial Services. So using that address, you can have your student mail or have the scholarship provider mail the check directly to our office, and we'll definitely get it processed.
Is there any other information that you would encourage those award checks to include to make sure that they're applying to the correct student account?
If you could maybe add a Post-it note onto that check, if there's nothing on there that indicates the student's name or the student ID number, maybe just add a note along with the check so that we know which student to give those funds to. So that's the best advice I have on that.
Great, thank you. Shifting gears a little bit, are folks able to decide to go with a PEP loan at any time during the student's time at WashU, or must this decision be made within that first year?
You can absolutely decide to go with the PEP loan or just get into the program later. You don't have to lock into participating in that program in the student's first year. In fact, many families maybe consider that as an option in year 2, 3, or 4, but it's not, we don't require you to enter in your first year, especially if it's something that you don't need at the time. So some
additional questions about the PEP option. So if you enroll in the installment payment plan, is it per semester? And are you able to use PEP financing if you enroll in the installment plan?
So that's a good question. The installment plan is on a semester's basis. So you have an opportunity to make 5 payments essentially. So the sooner you get in, the more advantage you can take of the program. So the earlier you get in, you can, spread your students' balance over 5 payments. But if you wait a month and you don't enroll until August, then that reduces it down to 4 payments. So, but that's why I said earlier, the sooner you can get in, the better. That way you can, again, spread those payments out over a longer period of time. But in terms of the PEP program, we don't see students or families, well, really families enroll in both. Because the PEP program is such a specialized program, and once you set up a loan for that, as an example, if you're deciding to borrow in that program, there is a process that is going to be put in place in terms of a pay down of that balance. And so I would not suggest that you dual enroll. I would, if you're not sure what you want to do, I would talk with the PEP specialist and let them know that you're weighing both scenarios, and they can guide you and give you some advice on what would work best for whatever your goals or objectives are. But I would not automatically jump out there and enroll in both programs, because you kind of like are stepping on each other, if you will.
If you use the multi-year PEP financing option, can you explain when you receive the funds for future semesters and when interest begins to accrue on these funds?
Well, I can tell you with the multi-year, so there's a lot of back office stuff that happens with this multi-year program. But let's say you decide to borrow all 4 years. Essentially, what happens is the university is going to set up, for lack of a better word, a shell account for you. And that shell account is going to show this family borrowed X dollars. And so what happens is there's these dollars that are set aside that have been borrowed by you. And with each semester, the PEP program is going to basically draw money from this shell account and then transfer that over to your student's account to pay on a frequency, maybe monthly, I believe. They're going to pay down that balance or pay it on a semester's basis. And so there's nothing that you would need to do as a family to activate that activity, because it's going to happen behind the scenes anyway. And it's going to happen over the 4-year period, if that's the period that you've enrolled in. So whatever your enrollment period is, please rest assured that these folks are going to take care and make sure that your students' balances are paid, and they're paid in a timely way.
Shifting gears a little bit, can students receive financial aid for summer classes? How does that work?
Well, students can receive financial aid for summer classes, but it's going to come in 2 forms. It's going to come in the form of a student loan, or if there's a student who is also Pell eligible, they would also receive some Pell funds. The reason for that is we don't provide any scholarships, need-based or merit scholarships, for summer coursework. So if a student is interested in studying over the summer, they're going to take out a loan. And like I said, if it's a student that is eligible for Pell, they're going to get some federal Pell dollars. But that's it.
Do students have to reapply every semester or every year for financial aid? What are the things and steps that they should be thinking about and doing in regards to that?
Yeah, so students will have to apply every single year in order to renew the award that they've been provided in their first year. And it's basically the same process that they followed this year. In the first year, they'll need to submit a FAFSA and a CSS profile. So we'll take that information and recalculate what the family demonstrated need is and create an award around that.
We're going to shift gears a little bit. We have a couple of questions around some pieces regarding work. So can you provide some more information about paid work on campus, particularly federal work study?
Well, what I can say about federal work study is this. We have students that on average work, I would say between 10 and 12 hours a week.
Mhm.
Students are paid through the Federal Work Study Fund, and this is on a bi-weekly basis. So federal work study dollars, even though they're allocated and awarded to a student as a part of their financial aid, the only way they get those funds is by earning them through working a part-time job.
Mhm.
They are not credited to the student's account, so they're not used to pay down their balance. So again, the only way they can get those funds it really is by working. The other thing I'll mention is we have wonderful campus employers that really support students and their professional development through these jobs. We really do see it as a way for students to grow and get experience that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And I often say that working part-time jobs like this help to kind of set them up and make them marketable for the more plum summer internship opportunities that will come up later. So we advise students not to overdo it,
Mhm.
to make sure that they work directly with their campus employer, show them their schedule, be realistic about the hours that you want to commit to, because our students are very engaged, they are very involved, and so not only are they attending classes, but they're very involved in student organizations in the St. Louis community. And so because of that spirit, sometimes trying to fit in a part-time job can be challenging. We do know that for financial reasons, many students do need to do that. But we never want the students to forsake their academics, chasing dollars. We would prefer to kind of work with that student to see what more we can do on our end to possibly increase any of the scholarships or grants that we're providing the students in lieu of them taking on more and more hours and just kind of drowning in that.
Thank you. Some rapid questions regarding work study. Where can students find the work study application again?
Well, what they can do now is go to the website that I mentioned in Career Services and create an account on the portal that's called Handshake. I had to think of the new name, Handshake. So they essentially are setting up an account. So we no longer have an application that students need to fill out. So they can kind of get the ball rolling by setting up an account. And there, of course, there's some internal processes that the Career Center has set up in order to, find these students or have them, show up as students interested in working. But yeah, it's a very much more efficient and streamlined process through this new platform.
How are the hours distributed throughout the week for work study students, or is this something that the individual hosts will work with the student on?
Yeah, so they would work with their employer and really figuring out a schedule that works for both parties.
How much do students make per hour through federal work study?
It kind of depends on the job, but for sure they're gonna make minimum wage. That's about the best I can say right now. Yeah.
And then if our student did not receive a federal work study, can they still create an account in Handshake and work with your office and the Career Center to help find employment?
They can. Mhm.
Awesome. Okay, we have some questions about health insurance and the cost for health insurance. Is the health insurance fee of $2,232 per semester, or is it annually?
Oh, thank goodness, it's just an annual charge.
Can you remind us again where students can find the health insurance waiver?
Yeah, so students can log into WebSTAC and there is a link that they can access. I think it's under billing, but they can access that link. There are a few questions that they would need to respond to. And then from there, they will get a message if their current coverage does not meet the university's minimum standards. It's going to immediately let them know that they are not eligible for a waiver. But I do believe that if there's no automatic message that they get back, then that's a good sign, and Habit will eventually, within a matter of days, let them know that they are that their waiver request has been approved, and then that fee will get deducted from their account.
If a student received a healthcare waiver or health insurance waiver, rather, when will that refund show up on the student's account? Typically.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not exactly sure about the exact timing, but I would say it's reasonable to assume within a matter of a couple weeks that they should see something fall off. And if they don't, then they have every right to, reach out to student accounting and ask about the timing of that.
And then for those families and students who do not qualify for the health insurance waiver, can this be supported by the financial aid package? What steps would you suggest they take in terms of where to go after that?
So I would definitely reach out to their SFS counselor and let them know that your family is challenged in meeting this expense, and that counselor will work with them to see what more can be done in terms of increasing financial aid for that student.
Does the FAFSA form need to be submitted annually, and when? What about the CSS form?
Yeah, so the FAFSA and the CSS will need to be submitted annually. Both forms will go live on October 1st. We have an early renewal program for students that want to renew their award. If they can get their financial aid applications into us, I believe we have set the deadline for mid-December this year. And if those forms are in our office by that date, then we will process the award renewal by the end of January. So by the end of January, students will know how much aid they're going to be receiving in the next school year by then.
We're going to ask one last question for the evening. Andrea, thank you so much for the information that you've shared tonight. Our last question, what tips do you have for parents and families as they have difficult conversations in the upcoming weeks with their students about financial matters?
Oh, wow. I would say the best advice is to communicate, have open and honest discussions. I know finances can be very awkward and uncomfortable for some families because they may not have ever had these kinds of discussions with their students. So I'm not suggesting that you open up your 1040 and just lay it all out in front of the student, but I would say begin conversations around expenses, because your students are going to be away from home, many of them for the first time, and they're going to be moving into adulting, taking on responsibilities in terms of managing funds. Spending is huge. If they can really get a handle on how they spend their funds, setting up a budget is real important. And this is something that we're really trying to emphasize with each incoming class. But as a family, set some guidelines on spending and really have a conversation around who is going to cover what expense. Some things like a cell phone bill. Who's paying the cell phone bill, especially if it's a student who's working? So I wouldn't make assumptions. I would just have a very candid conversation around who's paying for what, if it's an ongoing monthly expense. And then also I would say have a plan for emergencies. Our office, as well as other offices, sometimes things happen. Unfortunately, there could be the need to rush home for some reason. And so students will all of a sudden need to buy a plane ticket to get home, or if it's a student who has a car that they brought to campus, maybe the tire is blown out and all of a sudden the student has to replace that tire, or their car repairs. But we all know things happen in life, but if you plan for an emergency like that, and maybe just setting aside some funds for that, or at least have your student begin to think about, setting aside funding for that. That would relieve a lot of stress, I think, on everyone involved. So again, just having some open conversations, figure out who's paying for what, and try to do your best to plan for emergencies.
Andrea, the information that you provided this evening, I'm sure has been extremely helpful. I'm confident that families of WashU students have learned a lot from your presentation today. Families, we hope that you were able to gain some valuable information this evening. Please stay tuned for our next webinar, a conversation about Move-In Day and Bare Beginnings Fall Welcome, occurring on Thursday, August 11th at 5:30 p.m. You can register for this webinar at families.woostall.edu. We'll see you then.